everything approved. We go to the county courthouses. We identify the landowners who are inside that acquisition boundary. We send letters out wanting to know if you are interested in selling your property to us. It's usually accompanied by a form. You complete that form. You send it back to us. It goes in a file. If you're not willing to work with us, you don't want to sell your property, that's fine. If you are, then we will contact you further. We will ask you for permission to appraise your property. You are given the opportunity and encouraged to accompany the appraiser. Nobody knows your property better than you. And it probably has some special impacts on the community. It's just best if you accompany that appraiser should you decide to let us appraise the property. The cost of the appraisal is covered by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Once the appraisal is completed, we prepare a written offer, send it to you for your review, and you contact us, let us know if it's an acceptable offer. If it's not an acceptable offer, we have an opportunity to discuss it with you. If you don't accept the offer, that's fine. We walk away. If you do accept it, then we continue the process of ordering title searches, surveys, and all of that expense is covered by the Fish and Wildlife Service. You are out no money for any of those expenses. We do cover them all. If there's no title issues, survey issues associated with the property, a closing can be completed shortly after all of these steps have been taken. And again, emphasizing willing sellers only. Thank you. Now I will turn the program over to Jackie Compton, one of our senior realty specialists, and she's going to discuss conservation easements. Thank you.
I think Betty was afraid that she would say something carried by the mic like the politicians to do. Anyway, I'm Jackie Compton, and I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about conservation. Oh, what they're looking at here, proposing, is the can you hear me okay? Hello, sir. I was a cheerleader, and I didn't think I would need a mic, but apparently I do. The conservation area that they're talking about is in this lower portion here, and what a conservation easement is where you still take your keep as the landowner. You are still the landowner, and a conservation easement on your land means a little bit about like the fee simple, where you would get an appraisal and you would be paid if you were in agreement to that. Of course, the conservation easement program has a little bit to do, or the same thing as purchase, where we only work with willing sellers only. That is the Fish and Wildlife Service policy, and that's what we will do here on this refuge. The conservation areas, as I said, is down here on this portion here. It consists of, it's just a proposal of about 176,000 acres. We cannot do fee simple down here. We would only do conservation easements. You retain ownership of the land. And what that means is a conservation easement, we basically want you to keep the land as it is. And this just keeps from, if you were to sell the land, that it could be developed. The conservation easement runs with the land. If you were to sell your land, it would still be on that piece of property. You, as we said, you would get an appraisal on that land, and we would pay you for those rights. You stay the property owner on this. Let me see what else am I select. Easement, necessary to protect the conservation rights, such as water quality or habitat integrity. That's what that is.
She's got a question.
Well, ma'am, I understand. We're going to keep the questions till after everybody's So if you could write that down if you don't think you're gonna remember, okay, hon? Okay, as I said, the easement area is, we just want to protect the habitat that's there. We work with each individual tract owner. It's not like, oh, everyone gets the same. If you have, for instance, timber on your property, and you would want to cut that timber, well, you would work with us for an agreement on your conservation easement, so it is done individually. But what we want to do is just conserve that land in its natural state. If you have a home on there, then that home stays on there. So we are not taking basically any of your property rights. We want to conserve. The type of conservation easement that the refuge is looking at is purely keeping it at its natural state. They're either voluntarily donated or sold by landowners. As I said, retain natural vegetative cover, continue the private management of forest lands, and maintain vegetative buffers along the Cahaba River. The lands remain, as I said, and the I said that stuff already. I'm ahead of myself. And then now I'm back to Steve Miller is over here. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, real quickly, we're going to go into the proposal. The reason the proposal was made, the purpose of it is to help protect the water quality of the Cahaba River, to protect the habitat of the threatened and endangered species that are there, and then to restore those habitats. The proposed expansion, as Jackie just mentioned, is to take the current boundary of 7,600 acres of the refuge and expand that to a new acquisition boundary of 114,000 acres. And the proposed establishment of the conservation area is for 173,000 acres. And with that, let's turn it over because we're running way behind and we want to get these comments. Before we do start the comments, a couple of representatives, a couple of folks from Congress have representatives here. Brad Wilson is here for representing Senator Shelby, and I know Ms. Betty Bennett is here representing Congressman Backus. So I don't think they have any questions or comments, but let's go ahead and get started.
Can the representatives raise their hands? We've got one over here.
I'm up front and where everybody leaves.
Okay, one person at a time, remember? Microphone's up here. Are you the other representative? Okay, who's the other representative? Because I don't see another hand. Oh, over here in the back. Short like me. Okay, so one of the things that I want to say before we go ahead and start calling out the names, part of the reason that we're looking at this conservation area and looking at expanding the refuge is that there have been a lot of families in this area, and they've been very good stewards of this land. And for us, we want to maintain those natural values, those wildlife and habitat values that so many owners have been maintaining on their lands. And the way we do that is through some kind of agreement, so we have assurance that that's going to be maintained long into the future for future generations. And that's why we're here, because we want to make sure that the values of this area, the values of the Cahaba River, they are maintained for future generations, not just my son or his children, but on for grandchildren, because we want to make sure that those values exist in the future. So what we're going to do is call out the first speakers, and if you have had your question answered, or as we go through some of the speakers, if you've had your question answered, if your name gets called, and you don't have to stand up or raise your hand, because I will be bringing around wherever the microphone went. I'll be bringing around that microphone, or you can come up here to speak. But if you decided that you don't need to ask your question or you don't want to submit a comment, then just don't raise your hand and we'll move on to the next speakers. Okay, so let's get started. Kim's going to call I can call them. All right, we've got State.